My husband left while I was deployed. He packed everything while I was in Afghanistan. He left the dog. I want to tell you about the dog first, because the dog is part of the story in a way I didn't understand until much later. Her name is Biscuit. She was 6 years old when all of this started. A beagle mix with one ear that stands up and one ear that folds down, which gives her the permanent expression of someone who has just heard something surprising and is still processing it. My husband picked her out from the shelter 3 weeks before my second deployment. He said, "You need something to come home to." I said, "I have you." He said, "I know. I just think you need a dog too." He was right about the dog. He was wrong about the rest of it. My name is Melissa. I am 34 years old, and I served 11 years in the United States Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, and I was a logistics specialist, which is a job that does not get the recognition that other jobs get, but which is the job that makes every other job possible, because if the supplies don't move, nothing moves, and nobody eats, and nobody has ammunition, and nobody goes home. I was good at it. I was very good at it. My CO said in my final evaluation, Sergeant Carver has an instinct for solving problems that do not yet exist, which is the highest compliment you can give someone in logistics, and which I have thought about many times since. I should tell you about Marcus because you are going to wonder about him, and because the story is not really about him, but he is part of the structure of everything that came after. Marcus and I met at Fort Campbell. He was a mechanic, funny in the specific way that mechanics are funny, which is dryly and without much fanfare, the kind of funny where the joke lands 3 seconds after he says it, and then you're still laughing 2 minutes later. We got married fast, the way military couples sometimes do, not recklessly, but with a shared understanding that time is not always something you have in abundance. We had 4 good years. We had a hard year when I came back from the second tour, changed in ways I was not yet equipped to describe. We had another year that was better, and then worse. We had one final year where I was deployed, and he was home, and he made a decision I was not part of. He left a note on the kitchen counter. He left the note, and he left Biscuit, and he left the house we had rented together in Clarksville, Tennessee. And by the time I came home, he had been gone for 4 months, and the note was still on the counter, because my neighbor, Mrs. Patton, who had been watching Biscuit, had not known whether to move it. The note said 3 paragraphs. I have read it enough times that I have it memorized in the way you memorize things you did not choose to memorize. The first paragraph explained. The second paragraph apologized. The third paragraph said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." I never knew what this meant exactly. I am still not entirely sure. I sat on the kitchen floor, and Biscuit climbed into my lap, all 32 pounds of her in my lap, and she put her head under my chin, and she stayed there. I want to be honest about what came next, because I think the honest version matters more than the version that skips ahead to the good parts. The next 8 months were the hardest of my life, harder than 2 tours, harder than the things I saw and did and carried home from the things I saw and did. The hard things overseas have a structure to them, a mission, a chain of command, a purpose, a defined enemy. Coming home to an empty house after 11 years of service and a marriage that had quietly ended while I was doing my job had none of that. No structure, no enemy I could name. Just a silence in every room, and a dog who followed me from room to room, and a note on the counter that I finally put in a drawer but could not bring myself to throw away. I was not okay. I want to say that clearly because I think there is still a version of the story that is told where the veteran comes home and is fine, or becomes fine quickly. And that version is not dishonest exactly, but it is incomplete. I was not fine. I had nightmares that woke me up every other night. I had days where getting off the couch felt like a logistics problem I could not solve, which was a specific kind of irony given my job. I had a persistent sensation that I was behind thick glass, watching my own life from a slight remove, present, but not quite there. I knew what it was. I had the training. Knowing what something is does not automatically give you the tools to fix it. What happened was this. I started running. Not as therapy, not as strategy, not as anything intentional. I started running because Biscuit needed walking. And walking turned into jogging. And jogging turned into running. And running turned into the 1 hour of every day where I was not behind the glass, where I was fully in my body and my body was doing something it knew how to do. 3 miles. Then 5. Then I signed up for a 10K because I needed something with a structure, something with a date on the calendar, something that was not just motion, but motion toward. The race was in Nashville. It was a November morning, cold and bright, the kind of morning where your breath makes clouds and the ground is hard under your feet. I had trained for 6 weeks. I had not told anyone I was doing it. I drove to Nashville alone, pinned my number to my shirt in the parking lot, and stood at the starting line surrounded by strangers. There was a woman next to me. She was maybe 50, silver-haired, wearing a jacket that said Marine Corps Marathon Finisher across the back. She looked at my posture, at the way I was standing, and she said, "Army?" I said, "Was. You?" She said, "Marines, 12 years. I'm Carol." I said, "Melissa." She said, "First race?" I said, "Yes." She said, "It won't be the last." She was right. I finished the 10K in 54 minutes, which is not fast by any measure, but which felt, crossing that finish line, like something I had climbed rather than run. Carol finished 2 minutes ahead of me and was waiting at the finish with 2 cups of water, and she handed me one without ceremony and said, "What's next?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Half marathon in March. I'll send you the training plan." She sent me the training plan that evening. She had asked the race organizer for my contact information. Apparently, she had watched me cross the finish line and decided something before I even knew she was paying attention. I want to tell you about Carol because Carol is the actual center of this story, even though she didn't appear until the middle of it. Carol had done 12 years in the Marines and then 20 years as a nurse, and then retired and moved to Nashville to be near her grandchildren, and had, in her retirement, become one of those people who runs races the way other people watch television. Constantly, without particular urgency, for the simple reason that it makes life feel like it has a shape. She was not a counselor. She was not a therapist. She did not ask me probing questions or sit me down to discuss my feelings. She sent training plans and showed up at the designated meeting point on Saturday mornings at 6:30 with Biscuit's dog biscuits in her jacket pocket. And she ran beside me and she talked about her grandchildren and the Marines and a restaurant in Nashville she thought I needed to try and the specific technique for running hills that she had learned from a woman in her 60s who had run Boston 6 times. She talked about everything except the thing she clearly understood I was carrying. And then, one Saturday, about 3 months in, she didn't. We had done 11 miles, the longest I had ever run, and we were cooling down by the river, walking slowly with Biscuit trotting ahead on her leash. And Carol said, without preamble, "You don't have to have it figured out to be okay. You know that?" I said, "I'm not sure I know what okay means right now." She said, "I didn't either, for a while. After I got out, after my first marriage. There was a year I could not have told you what I was doing or why. I just kept moving. Moving is enough for a while. Moving is enough until you can see a little further ahead." I said, How do you know when you can see further ahead? She said, you just notice one day that you made a plan and the plan extends past next week. I thought about that for a long time. The half marathon was in March. I finished in 2 hours and 17 minutes. Carol was 7 minutes ahead of me. She was at the finish line with water and a protein bar, and the expression of someone who is not surprised at all. She said, "Full marathon in October?" I said, yes, I had made a plan. The plan extended past next week. I need to tell you what happened in June, because June is when the story changed again, and I had not seen it coming. I was at the VA, a routine appointment, nothing significant. I was in the waiting room with Biscuit, who is a certified therapy dog and comes with me everywhere she is permitted. And there was a young woman across the room who was filling out paperwork and crying quietly, in the specific way you cry when you are trying not to be seen crying. Small, controlled breaths, eyes down. I do not know why I crossed the room. I am not, by nature, the kind of person who crosses rooms toward strangers who are crying. The logistics specialist in me calculates before acting. But I crossed the room and I sat down one seat away, and I said, not looking at her directly, "It's a lot of paperwork." She laughed, just barely. She said, "It's so much paperwork." I said, "First time here?" She said, "Yes, I got out 6 weeks ago. I'm still figuring out how this works." I said, "I know, it took me a while too." She looked at Biscuit. She said, "What's her name?" I said, "Biscuit. She's friendly. You can pet her." She put her hand on Biscuit's head, and Biscuit leaned into her palm the way Biscuit does, with complete conviction. And the woman's shoulders came down about 2 inches, and she took a real breath. Her name was Dominique. She was 26. She had done 4 years as an MP and come home to a family that didn't understand, and a city that didn't know what to do with her, and a silence in every room that sounded familiar to me in a way I did not have to explain. I gave her Carol's number. I said, "This woman will send you a training plan, and she will show up, and she will not ask you to explain yourself, and that will help more than you think." Dominique looked at me. She said, "Did it help you?" I said, "Yes. Also the dog. Mostly the dog." She laughed again, fuller this time. We texted a few times over the following months. Nothing heavy. She'd send me a message when she finished a run. I'd send her one back. Carol had started meeting her on Tuesday mornings. She told me once, "Dominique reminds me of you when you first showed up." I took that as a good sign. I saw Dominique at the October Marathon. She was in the crowd, not running, but she was there with a sign that said, "Go Melissa," in letters she had clearly made herself, large and slightly uneven. And when I came around the turn at mile 18, which is the mile where everything hurts and the math of what remains starts to feel impossible, I saw the sign and I did not slow down. I finished in 4 hours and 41 minutes. Carol was 11 minutes ahead of me. She was at the finish line. I want to tell you where I am now, because this story has a now, and the now matters. I am 34 years old. I live in Nashville in an apartment that is mine, chosen by me, decorated by me, exactly the size I need. I have a job with a logistics consulting firm that specializes in healthcare supply chains, which is work that I am very good at and that uses every skill I built in 11 years of service, without requiring me to be anywhere I don't choose to be. I run 5 days a week. I have done 4 marathons. I am training for my first ultramarathon, 50 kilometers, in the spring. And when I tell Carol this, she makes the face of someone who is not surprised at all. Biscuit is 8 now. Both ears still go in different directions. She sleeps at the foot of my bed. I still have Marcus's note in the drawer. I have not thrown it away. I think I keep it not because of Marcus, but because of what the note represents, which is the hardest year of my life. And I have found that I do not want to throw that away entirely. You don't want to lose the evidence of things you survived. Last month, I got a message from Dominique. She had just finished her first 10K. She said it felt like climbing something. She said, I thought about what you said about moving being enough. It helped. I told Carol. She said, that's how it works. Someone moves toward you at the right moment. You move towards someone else. You just keep passing it forward. I said, did someone move toward you? She said, yes, a woman at a finish line a long time ago. She gave me water and didn't ask any questions and said, what's next? It changed the direction of things. I sat with that for a moment. I said, Carol, that's what you did for me. She said, I know. She handed me a training plan for the ultra. I have a note in the drawer that I don't look at. I have a dog with uneven ears who has not left my side. I have a friend who shows up at 6:30 on Saturday mornings with dog biscuits in her pocket. I have a training plan. The plan extends past next week. That is, it turns out, enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. I cross the finish line. I always do. I always will.